Why would people be so enraged at the idea of a handful of National Guardsmen standing around?
Because we don't want the military, we don't believe in the military controlling our cities. And
they're not going to control anything. What if they're just standing there? What if they're just standing guard?
Here's what this moment reveals. Abby Phillip convenes a panel to question something any democracy should: the growing comfort with military presence in U.S. cities. The contrast is immediate: a fact-based discussion on one side. On the other, MAGA pundits, Scott Jennings included, smirking while pushing misinformation. That smirk isn't confidence, it's deflection. When facts threaten a narrative, performance replaces substance. This isn't just cable news. It's about whether we're being nudged to accept the abnormal as normal, and why voices like Abby Phillip's matter in slowing the conversation and grounding it in evidence. That's where democracy lives, in scrutiny, not spectacle. If you believe the path forward is built on progress and accountability, hit subscribe.
A federal judge just delivered a major blow to the Trump administration's crackdown on American cities by blocking the president's push to deploy the National Guard in the state of Illinois, at least for now. Now, it was just one of the two courtroom showdowns today as Trump takes aim at Democratic-run cities to root out what he says is rampant crime. And other legal battles are waging in Portland, where an appeals court is weighing whether to block Trump from calling up the National Guard to respond to protests outside of an ICE facility. Now, an attorney for the state of Oregon argued that Trump has other non-military options to deal with the protests, but the judge wasn't buying it.
The problem that I have with this argument that I'm just trying to struggle with is, the president gets to direct his resources as he deems fit. And it just seems a little counterintuitive to me that the city of Portland can come in and say, no, you need to do it differently.
So that's a very skeptical judge in a 3-judge panel in the Ninth Circuit, which led a lot of people to believe, Judge Scheindlin, that they're going to reverse the lower court and uphold Trump's ability to have the Guard there. Do you think that's the right call?
No, I don't. I actually read the judge's opinion, the district judge. It was very well reasoned, very well read. It was meticulous in the fact finding, and usually an appellate court defers to the district judge on fact finding. So I was disturbed that they were questioning her finding of the facts, because she said in great detail there had been no recent violence at all. Everything was under control. The local police were handling everything. The streets were empty. There was just no basis in the law to call out the National Guard in Oregon. So,
and that may be, look, first of all, I also wonder, the court there also seemed to be saying the president's the president. He gets to do whatever he wants. Is that going to be the argument?
That is not true. That is not true. There is a statute that governs calling the National Guard into federal service. And there's 2 sections of it that would be important here. One is if there's a rebellion or a danger of rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States. And both judges in Chicago now and in Portland said there's no rebellion and there's no danger of rebellion. The only other possible prong is the president is unable with the regular forces to execute the laws of the United States. And that didn't seem to be the least bit true. The laws were being enforced. Everybody was going about their business. Yes, there's peaceful protests, but we're allowed to do that in this country.
Peaceful?
Yes, sir.
There
were protests in June
Okay.
that were not particularly peaceful. There was some violence then, but by September there were 10 or 15 people marching around with signs. I'm sure you believe in First Amendment right to protest, don't you?
Yeah, but I don't believe in people attacking ICE facilities. I don't believe in people attacking ICE agents.
That wasn't going on.
And when you talk about what's happening now, you got a TV? Turn it on. There is violence in Portland.
Can I tell you what's happening
and they're
now?
attacking federal
Scott,
facilities.
what is happening now?
They're attacking federal facilities. And the Portland police do nothing. They do nothing.
Because the National Guard is being called out, it is ramping up the situation. It's creating the exact
Is that license to commit violence?
It's creating the chaos and danger that this administration wants to create, so then it has an excuse to suppress it.
When former judge after judge asks a simple constitutional question, do you believe in the First Amendment right to protest? Scott Jennings doesn't engage it. He smirks. That smirk isn't casual. It's dismissal disguised as confidence, and it exposes a deeper problem in the MAGA media world. Here's what that really exposes. For Scott Jennings and his MAGA allies, Protest is only acceptable when it's politically convenient. The moment someone even slightly left of center speaks out or marches, Scott Jennings instantly labels them violent. No evidence, no context, just accusation. He goes on Abby Phillip's show night after night repeating this script. It's not reality check journalism. It's narrative engineering. And Abby Phillip, committed to facts and accountability, repeatedly interrupts this performance to anchor the conversation in law and evidence. And the facts tell a very different story. While Scott Jennings describes Portland as a violent hellscape, video evidence shows something almost comical. Small groups of people in frog costumes, chickens, even unicorns, peacefully protesting outside ICE facilities. Abby Phillip highlights this contrast, showing the absurdity of Jennings's claims. This is a pattern. Exaggerate the threat, manufacture fear, and then justify extraordinary measures like deploying the military. This is where democracy meets denial. When courts, like the ones overseeing Portland and Illinois, point out that presidential authority has limits, Scott Jennings cheers regardless. He applauds these stretches of power, not out of respect for law, but out of loyalty to MAGA authority. Abby Phillip, by contrast, insists on scrutiny and accountability, showing that defending democracy requires questioning power, not blindly supporting it. Because democracy doesn't collapse all at once. It erodes when imagined chaos, amplified by Scott Jennings and MAGA media, becomes the justification for extraordinary measures, and when smirks replace serious engagement with constitutional rights. Abby Phillip's work reminds us that vigilance and evidence are the only antidotes to this erosion. That's the pattern. Scott Jennings pushing narrative, Abby Phillip defending facts, and the stakes for democracy higher than ever.
Provocation.
In Portland, the Department of Homeland Security thanked the local law enforcement for doing such a good job, which is a clear indication that they had things under control and they didn't need DHS. Things have calmed down. No one is endorsing violence against anyone, but things have calmed down. Not at this table.
Some people are. Some people think it's great.
This takes you back to 2020 during the Summer of Love when everyone said, no, they're just peacefully protesting. People are destroying federal government property.
Right now in Portland.
People are absolutely hindering federal law enforcement
Not
from doing
today.
their job.
Did you read the judge's
and the President
findings?
of the United States absolutely has the authority
The judge has
to
said
activate
that
the National
I don't
Guard
think he read
and
it.
bring National Guard in to keep the peace and to protect federal facilities.
Hold on one second.
Hold
Hold on one second, Christine. Hold on one second. Let me let him finish.
He has the authority if that were the facts. But if you read the recitation of the facts that the judge found, there's no records of that.
Judge,
the local police had a day-to-day.
Judge, you just said that when the National Guard showed up, people became enraged. It's not a license.
Oh, no, that's after federalizing the Guard.
Let me just let you finish your statement because you were saying the police had a day-to-day recitation.
They did, and it's in her opinion. They produced logs, and they showed what happened every single day for the last 30 days. There was no violence at all. There was no destruction at all. They walked around with their signs, 10 to 15 people walking in front of the ICE facility.
If there's no violence and there's no mayhem and there's nothing going on, why would people be so enraged at the idea of a handful of National Guardsmen standing around?
Because we don't want the military. We don't believe in the military controlling our cities. And
they're not going to control anything. What if they're just standing there? What if they're just standing guard?
Let me
that doesn't
let me answer
control
Scott's
anything.
question.
The 10th Amendment. We also have the 10th Amendment. We reserve to the states the police power. Sorry.
Let me answer Scott's question. I helped lead disaster response under Joe Biden, and the thing that kept us up at night was when there was a bridge collapse, when there was a shooting, when there was a hurricane, which thank God there has not been a major hurricane so far this year. The time in which the National Guard could be deployed in an expeditious way was critical to saving lives. When you look at what's happening in D.C., you have National Guard members shagging foul balls in Little League practices. You have them marching around Georgetown. We need them trained and ready to go in the instant of a disaster. Every minute we're distracted by sending the National Guard away from where they're based to all around the country to do things like that makes us all less safe. That's why it's a problem.
I don't think it makes anybody in Washington less safe.
Here's where the dissonance becomes glaring. Scott Jennings keeps asking, almost rhetorically, what's wrong with having a military occupation? And that question is not neutral. It reveals exactly what this debate is about. Not public safety, not policy, but the normalization of extraordinary power, framed as ordinary, framed as necessary. Let's be crystal clear. In the United States, we have police forces for a reason. Their job is to prevent crime, protect citizens, and maintain safety and order within neighborhoods, cities, counties, and communities. The military, by contrast, exists for national defense, disaster response, and extraordinary emergencies, not to patrol city streets. No matter how Scott Jennings frames it on Abby Phillip's show, no matter how harmless he claims it is, sending the military into American cities as if it were just another tool for local law enforcement is fundamentally at odds with democratic principles. This is not a debate over opinion. It's a question of constitutional limits and civil liberties. The reality on the ground could not be more different from the narrative Scott Jennings pushes. In Chicago, local police have repeatedly reported interference from ICE and National Guard units, accidental tear gassing, confusion, and unnecessary escalation. Scott Jennings presents these incidents as evidence of chaos and violence, while Abby Phillip emphasizes the truth. In Portland, for example, small groups of protesters, sometimes dressed in frog, unicorn, or chicken costumes, are peacefully exercising their First Amendment rights outside ICE facilities. Experts like Dan Coe repeatedly confirm what Abby Phillip highlights. There is no violence, no property destruction, no credible threat. Scott Jennings' so-called violent hellscape is entirely fabricated, yet he delivers it with a smirk, as if performance can replace evidence. Abby Phillip continually exposes the dangerous gap between rhetoric and reality. Judges overseeing the Portland and Illinois cases have pointedly clarified that the Trump administration's deployment of troops is legally unjustified. And yet, Scott Jennings cheers on this overreach. He smiles for the cameras, muggings and all, claiming he anticipated the violence that never existed. This is performative, not principled, propaganda masquerading as analysis. Abby Phillip, by contrast, challenges every distortion, holding the discussion firmly in the realm of facts, law, and democratic accountability. This is exactly where democracy is tested. Scott Jennings and MAGA media treat fear as a strategic tool, inflating threats to justify extraordinary measures and undermining civilian oversight. Abby Phillip reminds viewers that oversight, proportionality, and evidence are not optional. Democracy doesn't collapse all at once. It erodes when media figures cheer for military occupation of cities, when smirks replace reasoned responses to constitutional questions, and when evidence is drowned out by theatrics. The truth is undeniable. Police enforce the law, the military protects the nation, and Scott Jennings' narrative cannot alter that reality. Abby Phillip ensures the public sees the truth. This is the repeated pattern. Scott Jennings amplifying fear and disinformation, Abby Phillip defending evidence and accountability, and American democracy precariously hanging in the balance.